Fair and balanced debate on this contentious issue. Let's start tonight with former Congressman and current talk show host J.D. Hayworth, who, as I mentioned, is running against John McCain in the Republican primary for Senate. He's a strong supporter of the new Arizona law. And the Reverend Al Sharpton of the National Action Network, who today vowed to bring the tactics of the freedom marches to the state of Arizona. Rev, you first. Are you literally going to bring your supporters to the streets of Phoenix?
I've been to Phoenix 3 times last year, including meeting with the sheriff there around this issue. And I'm very concerned about the racial profiling aspect of this. So what we're hoping is that the federal courts would stop this. We would hope that the constitutional
law... If they don't.
But if they don't, we're prepared to go out. We began the organizing. I've been talking to some of the ministers all day.
What would you do? What would tactic?
We would go with groups of people and refuse to give identification. And we would, at that point, the police, based on what they've said, and since there'll be groups of blacks and browns, would have to make arrests. And it would clearly then show the world how archaic and draconian this is, because if everyone refused ID there, they would have to make arrests in a unilateral way, which exposes how you violate people's rights here.
J.D., is it worth that hassle?
Well, Geraldo, let's deal with facts here. And all that Arizona has done in putting this law into effect is to simply enforce federal laws on the books. Now, if Reverend Al and President Obama and Secretary Napolitano and others have a problem with current federal law, the federal law should be changed. But right now, it is against the law to come into our country unauthorized without permission. And it is important for those who have green cards to carry those green cards. That's the law as it exists right now. And all the talk attempting to change this and redefine this as racial profiling just isn't accurate.
But you know, J.D., they're just not going to stop you. They're going to stop my son. Isn't that something that seems fundamentally unfair?
Well, let's talk about that, Geraldo, because you've used that example many times, and I recall your book of a couple of years ago. I believe the title was Hispanic, with the emphasis on panic. We need a rational discussion here. And what is that discussion? We understand
that was a pretty rational book, J.D., just parenthetically.
Well, okay.
But
well, I don't know. I take exception with a few of the descriptions you used for me, Geraldo, okay. But be that as it may. Good people can disagree, and let's set the perspective here. Look. This is for trained law enforcement professionals if, during the course of their daily duties, someone has apparently broken the law or under suspicion of breaking the law and there is reasonable cause, then they check immigration status. It is not going out to check people's papers. It is not something out of a grade B movie. This is simply what trained law enforcement professionals will do in the course of their daily duties in terms of hunting down wrongdoing. It is not something where special exception will be made. Geraldo, I believe last night when Sheriff Joe was on with you, you said you would be walking down the street and you would be instantly profiled. Now, Geraldo, you're a trained attorney, and come on, that's simple hyperbole.
Well, in my case, good.
I taken J.D. at his word that we'll have a reasonable discussion. If it was as simple as enforcing federal law, then it wouldn't have been necessary to have the state law. Clearly, it is to expand the powers of the police. Clearly, it is designed to give them the right to do more than just enforce federal law. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone to go with additional state laws to give them additional powers that they can, just based on their own suspicion, stop someone that fits a profile. There's no way of getting around that. If you were just enforcing federal law, then why didn't you just enforce the federal law? Why have a new state law at all?
J.D., let me ask you.
Well, because the federal law... Okay. Can I answer Reverend Al's question?
You can do that and respond to that. Answer Reverend Al's question, and then is it worth it if the state is boycotted and you're hurt commercially, as many groups are now pledging they will avoid Arizona and boycott Arizona if this law is indeed put into effect about 89 days from now?
Well, okay, Geraldo, let me take Reverend Al's assertion first. And Reverend Sharpton, maybe there's a point of agreement here. You see, the problem is we haven't seen the law enforced from Washington on a federal basis. It seems that official Washington, Republicans and Democrats, including my opponent, Senator McCain, have vacillated between inaction and amnesty bills. And because of that, there is great frustration. So states have the absolute right, when the federal government does not live up to the constitutional mandate, to enforce federal law. After all, we don't have law enforcement officials picking and choosing what laws to enforce as if there's a smorgasbord. Now, Geraldo, to your question about economic boycotts. Obviously, that's not the case with Reverend Al, because he's prepared to make another trip here, I believe by what I heard, his 4th trip in recent months. So we welcome Reverend Al and a variety of people here to Arizona.
Well, I'm not going to spend any money there, JD.
Okay.
But I will say
come on, Al, what are you going to do? Come in for 2 hours?
If you look at your state law, that would be up to the sheriff. But if you look at your state law and the federal law, you can clearly see that the state law.
I know some great burrito shops you can go to, very low price.
The state law just signed does not at all look like the federal law.
I got to put a pause on this. Our great debate will continue. Senate candidate J.D. Hayworth, welcome back. There's an article in Politico. I don't know if you saw it last week. You were prominently mentioned in it, and it has phrases like Arizona is turning into a punchline. It's, quote, a wingnut paradise. Quote, it features the nation's nuttiest legislative body who are, quote, blazing a trail into the fringe. I mean, the birther bill, J.D., I mean, what's that about?
Yeah, I don't agree with the bill. I believe it's too narrowly drawn. I do believe, however,
you think it's too weak?
Let's set the stage here. Geraldo, as you know, the cornerstone of the law is what is reasonable. And right now, what do we require of voters in this state and other states? The ability to prove that voters are who they say they are. Now, if we're asking that from voters, shouldn't we ask that from every candidate on the ballot? Not exclusively for the presidency,
you're an articulate guy. You're very clever, J.D. You were very effective in Congress. I put you on television a long, long time ago and was very pleased to do so. But you got to be kidding me. This is not about that. No, this is about think Obama was born in Kenya, or you think he was born in Indonesia, and this is about the president. This isn't about you can't give me that song and dance.
Well, no, Geraldo. First of all, I appreciate the fact that you recount that it's almost like a modern day Arthur Godfrey and the Talent Scouts. Thanks for the chance to be on with you. But let me make this point. I don't agree with the bill the way it's drawn. I do believe
you don't agree with it in
another context.
It's weak.
No, what I said was that everyone running for public office, just as we request of voters
so you've become a
ID
birther.
that voters
you've become
are
a birther then.
No, I have not. You're changing this entirely around. Geraldo.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what I agree with you. Before you say good night, I want to tell you what I agree with you about.
Well, I don't want to say good night yet. Okay, go ahead.
I think that John McCain, one of my heroes, has been really such a hypocrite on the immigration issue. At least you have been consistent. Love you or hate you, and apparently most people in Arizona, I think most people in the country agree with you. You have been consistent, J.D.
Well, again, Geraldo, thanks for the time. And a previous guest, Phil Gordon, now wanting to file a lawsuit. Phil Gordon is one of John McCain's biggest supporters for the U.S. Senate. I would call on Senator McCain either to repudiate the lawsuit effort of Phil Gordon or to stand beside him and again say, hey, I was really for amnesty all along. That's up to Senator McCain. Also, we need to have the debates. I'm filing my petition signatures tomorrow. I'm ready to debate John McCain anytime.
I will follow it.